Under Paris, there are 280 kilometers of passages. 1.5 are open. Everything else is locked, and in the year 2004, a patrol accidentally found out that someone lives down there. A cinema hall of 400 square meters. Armchairs, a screen, a projector, a bar behind the wall. Electricity is supplied according to all the rules, and 3 telephone lines. When the investigators returned, the cables were cut, and on the floor lay a note consisting of one phrase. Its text is at the end of the episode. Before that, there will be caves where things no less strange were found. A copper scroll with a list of hiding places that no one can find. The bones of 15 people in a chamber where it is impossible to squeeze through. Statues at the bottom of a grotto. Some of this is explained, some of it still hangs without an answer. You are on the Top Facts channel. I wish everyone a pleasant viewing. 442 objects in one stone crevice. That is how many the archaeologist Pesach Baradon took out in the year 1961 from a cave in the Nahal Mishmar Gorge in the Judean desert. Everything lay in one bundle made of a reed mat pushed into a crack under a stone. Inside were scepters, mace heads, crowns, and vessels, copper, ivory, bone. The age is about 6,000 years. That is, this is the work of masters who lived before the appearance of writing in these lands. The technology for that time is difficult. Much is cast using the lost wax model. First, a wax figure is sculpted, then it is smeared with clay. The wax is melted out and metal is poured into the void. Analysis showed that the copper is arsenical and there is none like it in the Judean desert. The metal was brought from afar, most likely from the north. It is impossible to get to the hiding place without equipment. The crevice is in the sheer wall of the gorge. That is why the bundle lay for 6,000 years untouched. Who hid it is unknown. The most popular version connects the hoard with the temple in Engedi, which stood nearby in the same centuries and was abandoned without traces of destruction. Perhaps the utensils were taken out of the temple in a hurry and they did not return for them. Now almost all of this lies in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Air was drafting from under the stones. On the 18th of December, 1994, 3 speleologists were clearing a blockage in the Ardèche Gorge in the south of France: Jean-Marie Chauvet, Eliette Brunel, and Christian Hilaire. They widened the manhole, lowered a folding ladder, and went down 10 meters. The walls were covered in drawings. More than 400 animals, and not only the usual horses: lions, rhinoceroses, mammoths, cave bears. The age is from 32,000 to 36,000 years. This is almost twice as old as Lascaux. On the panel with lions, a pride is going after bisons. The muzzles are repeated with a shift, and because of this, it seems that the beasts are moving. On the floor lie the skulls of bears, and one is placed on a fallen boulder exactly in the middle of the hall, like on a stand. Why? No one knows. Also, footprints were preserved in the clay, a path of footprints of a child of about 8 years old, and next to them the footprints of a large dog or a wolf. They passed there approximately 26,000 years ago. The cave was saved by a collapse. The entrance was blocked in the Ice Age, and neither people nor dampness from the surface got inside. That is why the original was never open to the public. A copy was built 2 kilometers away. The cave was blown up for the sake of lime. To the northwest of Johannesburg, workers were mining limestone and throwing pieces of rock with bones into the dump. In the year 1936, the paleontologist Robert Broom arrived at these dumps, and this is how the story of Sterkfontein began. 11 years later, Broom took out from there an almost complete skull of Australopithecus africanus. It was given the nickname Mrs. Please. The age is about 2,100,000 years. Before this, the thought that humans originated in Africa was considered an eccentricity, and science looked towards Asia. But the most beautiful thing happened in the year 1994. Ronald Clark was sorting through a box with animal bones from old excavations and pulled out 4 small bones of a hominid foot. He realized that somewhere in the cave a skeleton remained, from which they were broken off. Clark gave 2 employees, Stephen Motsumi and Nkwane Malefe, a cast of the fracture and sent them to look for a place that this fracture would fit. In the dark, with lanterns on hundreds of square meters of wall, they found it in 2 days. The skeleton received the name Littlefoot. It is about 3.5 million years old, and it is almost complete, a rarity for such antiquities. The rock around was harder than concrete, and the extraction took more than 20 years of manual work with needles and micro drills. On a piece of ochre the size of a palm, a grid is scratched. Straight lines, crossed at an angle, and absolutely no practical sense. The age is about 73,000 years. Until this discovery, it was believed that humans began to draw symbols about 40,000 years ago, and necessarily in Europe. The Blombos Cave stands on the southern coast of Africa, in a cliff over the ocean. Christopher Henshelwood has been excavating it since the early 90s, and this site has been familiar to him since childhood. The land belonged to his grandfather, and he picked up stone tools there even as a boy. Besides the ochre, they found shells with pierced holes and traces of rubbing from a thread. Beads. They found thin points made of silkrete, which were heated on coals before processing so that the stone would split more easily. And they found 2 abalone shells in which lay ground ochre, mixed with bone dust and fat. This is a paint grinder 100,000 years old, the oldest known. And in the year 2018, a stone flake with 6 red lines was taken out of the dump. They were not scratched, they were drawn with a piece of ochre sharpened like a pencil. For what, it is unknown. The drawing breaks off at the chip and the second half of the stone is lost. The little piece of bone was smaller than the fingernail on a pinky. It was lifted in the year 2008 in the Denisovan cave in the Altai, in a layer where ordinary tools had previously been found. It was the finger phalanx of a girl of about 13 years old. The bone was sent to Leipzig, to the laboratory of Svante Pabo. 2 years later, an article came out, and it turned out that genetically this person is neither a sapiens nor a Neanderthal. A new species was described without a skull, without a skeleton, and without a single whole tooth, solely by DNA. This had never been done in science before. Further on, the Denisovan cave began to yield one find at a time. In the year 2018, the geneticist Vivienne Sloan analyzed a bone fragment under the number 11 and received a result that she herself initially did not believe. The girl, who was named Denny, had a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, the first direct proof that 2 different human species did not just meet but had children. Then they learned to read DNA straight from the soil. The earth from the bottom of the cave is disassembled into layers, and the genetic traces of those who breathed, ate, and died here are pulled out. It turned out that the cave was occupied in turns for 300,000 years. Somewhere only Denisovans, somewhere Neanderthals, somewhere sapiens. There is no other such place on Earth. There are also things there. The most famous is a fragment of a chloritolite bracelet with a perfectly round hole, drilled with something rotating. The age is debated, the layer is disputed, but the hole is made surprisingly neatly. Denisovans did not have a face at all for a long time. It appeared only in the year 2025, a massive skull, found back in the 30s in Harbin and having lain in a well for decades, turned out to be Denisovan based on proteins and DNA from dental calculus. Later in this list, there will be an opposite case. People will go underground on purpose and leave behind a single note. Tourists climbed a hill in Myanmar and climbed into a cave to wait out the heat. Inside on the walls were circles, numbers, and Latin abbreviations carved into the stone. February of the year 2024, border mountains near the Indian border. The place looks like a transit camp from the times of the Second World War. Through these ridges in the year 1942, refugees and retreating units left for India, and later supplies against the Japanese army were pulled here. Caves in these parts were used as warehouses, hospitals, and shelters from aviation. It is dry, cool, and not visible from the air. No excavations were carried out there. There are no datings, and everything that is known relies on the stories of local residents and photographs. So the record on the wall remains a record on the wall. The soot on the ceiling, by the way, has not weathered away to this day. The skull was not in the earth but inside a stone. It was found in the year 1960 in a limestone cave near the village of Petralona in northern Greece. Local residents were looking for water. The bone grew into a flowstone, and it was enveloped by a layer of calcite that dripped from the ceiling for thousands of years. Excavations were started by the anthropologist Eris Poulianos. Besides the skull, he lifted the bones of cave bears, lions, and rhinoceroses, stone tools, and traces of fire pits. The cave worked as a trap. Animals and people fell inside, and layers accumulated for hundreds of thousands of years. The skull itself is strange. A heavy brow ridge, thick bones, a wide face, and at the same time a brain volume close to ours. At first they argued whether it was an erectus or an early sapiens. Now it is more often attributed to the Heidelberg man, the common ancestor of us and the Neanderthals. With the age it turned out worse. The first estimates gave 70,000 years. Then the uranium-thorium method and electron paramagnetic resonance shifted the figure to 200,000 to 350,000. New measurements of recent years pull closer to 300,000, but there is no common point in the dispute. Poulianos argued that this is a separate European human lineage. They did not agree with him. The excavations were taken away from him, and the litigation around the cave dragged on for decades. The skull is still kept in Thessaloniki. It is impossible to walk into this cave on foot. Altinbesik in the south of Turkey is open to people only part of the year. The rest of the time, the underground lake rises and blocks the passages. Visitors are taken on a boat, and the motor is turned off. Otherwise, you cannot hear how the water drips from the ceiling. The passages stretch for more than 2,500 meters. The lake, with a length of about 125 meters, is considered the largest underground reservoir in Turkey. The water in it is cold all year round and so transparent that the bottom seems closer than it is. The main thing here is the travertine partitions. The lime dissolved in the water over thousands of years has built up stone dams across the passage, and the lake stands in steps. Such baths exist on the surface in Pamukkale, but there millions see them, while here they are hidden under a mountain. They often write about Altinbesik that ceramics, flint tools, and traces of people 7,000 years old were found inside. Håkon was looking for agar wood in the forest and hid from the rain under a cliff. From a collapse in the stone came a draft of cold and the rumble of water. He did not climb inside, and when he returned to the village, he could not really explain where it was. The year is 1991, Central Vietnam. Vinny went to look for this place many times and did not find it. He found it by accident in the year 2008 during another trip for food, and this time he remembered the way. In the year 2009, he brought the British speleologists Howard and Deb Limbert there. They measured the passage and received numbers that no one expected. The vault height is more than 200 meters. The width is about 150. The length is almost 9 kilometers. Son Doong turned out to be the largest cave on the planet. A block of high-rise buildings would fit inside. In several places, the vault collapsed about 500,000 years ago, and sunlight entered the holes. Under them grew a real forest with trees up to 30 meters high, monkeys, and flying foxes. Due to the temperature difference, clouds gather under the ceiling, and inside the cave its own rain falls. The expedition of the year 2009 was stopped by a 70-meter flowstone wall. It was nicknamed the Great Wall of Vietnam, and they climbed over it only a year later. Now 1,000 people a year are allowed there. The tour lasts 6 days and costs about $3,000. One company guides everyone. The project of a cable car to the cave was discussed, but after a public scandal it was abandoned. You are allowed into this cave lying on your back. The entrance to the Blue Grotto on the island of Capri is a crevice about 2 meters wide and 1 meter high. Therefore, passengers lie down on the bottom of a rowboat, and the boatman pulls the chain with his hands and pulls the boat inside. At the slightest wave, work is stopped for the entire day. Inside, the water glows blue. The second opening of the grotto is located underwater, and sunlight passes through the thickness of the sea, which extinguishes the red and yellow. The blue remains, and it shines from below, from the bottom. The Romans already knew the place. Emperor Tiberius moved to Capri in the year 26, ruled the empire from the island for 12 years, and set up a personal pool in the grotto, with a pier and statues of sea gods along the walls. After the fall of the empire, all this went underwater, and for many centuries the grotto gained the reputation of a witch's lair. Fishermen did not approach it. It was rediscovered in the year 1826 by the German poet August Kopisch, together with a local resident, who showed him the way. A few years later, the grotto became a mandatory point in the travels of European nobility, and the statues were retrieved only in the year 1964. The diver Gennaro Alberino groped a stone figure at a depth of about 22 meters, then 2 more were raised. By the number of niches in the walls, it is believed that there were about 7 of them in total. The rest are still at the bottom. On the 2nd of December 1929, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the workers had very little light left. Excavations in the Zhoukoudian Hills near Beijing had been going on for the 3rd year and were yielding nothing of substance. The young Chinese paleontologist Pei Wenzong climbed into a narrow crevice with a candle and saw in the wall a rounded object halfway in the rock. It was an almost whole skull cap. Pei chopped it out together with a piece of stone, wrapped it in his clothes, and brought it to Beijing personally on his own lap. Thus, science received the Peking Man, a representative of the species Homo erectus, who lived here between 400,000 and 800,000 years ago. Over the following years, the remains of approximately 40 individuals, thousands of tools, and thick layers of ash were extracted from the cave. This is a separate species and not a subspecies of us, and it died out long before the appearance of modern humans. And then the bones disappeared. In the year 1941, due to the threat of a Japanese invasion, they were packed into boxes and handed over to American Marines for shipment to the United States. The boxes reached the port of Qinhuangdao, then the war in the Pacific Ocean began and the trail went cold. They have not been found to this day, although a reward has been announced more than once. Only plaster casts remain. This discovery also had a second life. Under Mao, the Peking Man was inserted into the school curriculum as proof of the thesis that labor created man, and from it they deduced the idea of primitive communism. Science here mixed with ideology so tightly that it was possible to separate them only decades later. Chen Zikai climbed into a narrow side passage and saw that something was shining in a depression. He was one of 3 members of an Israeli speleological club who in February of the year 2015 were climbing a stalactite cave in the north of the country. In the niche lay 2 silver coins from the time of Alexander the Great. On one, the head of the king himself, on the other, Zeus on a throne. Nearby, rings, bracelets, and earrings. All this was once in a cloth bag from which only decayed pile remained. The guys did not take a single coin. They photographed the find, climbed out, and called the Antiquities Authority, and the next day an official group arrived. By the coins, they also determined the time. The freshest coin in the hoard shows the earliest possible date of the hiding place, and it turned out that the things were hidden shortly after the death of Alexander, when his generals were dividing the empire and armies were roaming the country. Hiding silver back then was reasonable. At the same time, it turned out that the cave was used long before this. In the same halls, they found ceramics of the Copper Age and the early Bronze Age. The authorities do not name the exact location. It is better for outsiders not to go there. A shepherd threw a stone into a hole in the cliff and heard how something broke inside. The sound was ceramic. Muhammad Adib was looking for a stray goat, but found clay jugs in which lay scrolls in linen wrapping. The shore of the Dead Sea, the Qumran area. Then everyone immediately took up the matter. Bedouins, antiquities dealers, and archaeologists. From 11 caves, they took out more than 900 manuscripts. The earliest were written in the 3rd century before our era. The latest lay to 10 in the 1st century of our era. Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek. Among the texts, there were found excerpts of all the books of the Hebrew Bible, except the Book of Esther. Until this discovery, the oldest known copies were almost 1,000 years younger. The text converged almost verbatim, and this turned out to be the main scientific result of the whole story. The scroll from the 3rd cave, found in the year 1952, stands apart. It is not made of leather and not of papyrus. It is made of copper. Embossed on it is a list of hiding places, how much gold and silver is hidden and under what landmark. The majority of historians believe that this is an inventory of temple property. Not a single hiding place from the list has been found to this day. Learned Europe declared him a liar. The Spanish landowner Marcelino Sanz de Saltuola, in the year 1880, showed colleagues drawings of bisons from the ceiling of a cave near the town of Santillana del Mar and heard that this is a fake. It was believed that ancient man was not capable of such a thing. They directly hinted to him that the drawings were commissioned to an artist. The cave was accidentally discovered 12 years prior by the hunter Modesto Cubillas, but Satuola's 8-year-old daughter Maria was the first to see the ceiling. Adults looked under their feet at the layer of bones and flint while the child raised her head. The ceiling is low. To work, the artist had to lie on his back almost flush with the stone. Bisons up to 2 meters in length are painted with red ochre, black charcoal, and yellow clay, while the convexities of the stone are used as the sides and backs of the animals. The age of the drawings is from 36,000 to 14,000 years. Satuola died in the year 1888 with the reputation of a falsifier. He was exonerated only after similar drawings were found in French caves. Then the cave was almost killed by fame. The breathing of thousands of visitors raised the humidity and carbon dioxide. Mold grew over the paints, and in the year 1977 the entrance was closed. A copy was built nearby. Since the year 2014, they allow entry into the original, a few people a week, by lottery in sterile clothing for 37 minutes. On the 12th of September 1940, 4 teenagers from the village of Montignac climbed into a hole under an uprooted tree. According to the most famous version, the dog of one of them fell in there first. Marcel Ravadat was 18. He had a homemade lamp and he went down first. What they saw had lain underground for about 17,000 years. More than 600 drawings and about 1,500 engravings. Horses, deer, bulls, goats. In the Hall of the Bulls, the figures reach 5 meters in length. The paints, iron oxide, manganese oxide, charcoal. They were ground and applied with swabs made of hide or blown out through a hollow bone. Depressions for supports remained in the walls. The artists built scaffolding to reach the vault. This is no longer an impulse, but work with a plan. There is one scene in Lascaux that has not been explained to this day. In a deep shaft, a man with a bird's head is drawn. He is falling backwards in front of a wounded bison, and nearby stands a bird on a pole. It has dozens of interpretations. There is no single agreement. After the war, the cave was open to everyone, and by the 50s, 1,000 people a day were going there. From the heat and breathing, algae and calcite spread on the walls. In the year 1963, the entrance was closed. Now tourists walk through copies. The latest, fourth one, opened in the year 2016 and repeats the original via laser scanning down to the millimeter. A few specialists enter the real cave on just a few days a year. An A4 size sheet of paper is wider than this manhole, 18 centimeters. That is how much it was at the narrowest point of the passage that led to the distant chamber of the Rising Star cave system in South Africa. In the year 2013, 2 speleologists squeezed through there and saw that the floor was strewn with bones. The paleoanthropologist Lee Berger realized that he himself would never pass through there. He posted an announcement on a social network. People with experience in underground work, thin and without claustrophobia, are needed. From those who responded, they selected 6. All turned out to be women. They worked in the chamber for several hours at a time, and Berger sat upstairs at a monitor. They took out more than 1,500 bones from at least 15 individuals, infants, children, adults. The species turned out to be unknown. Their brain was approximately 3 times smaller than ours, but the hand, foot, and legs almost modern, and the fingers curved, like those who climb a lot. The age is from 236,000 to 335,000 years. That is, they lived simultaneously with early sapiens. Then began a dispute that is not finished. Berger stated that the bodies were brought into the chamber on purpose, and later that there are scratch signs and traces of fire nearby. Reviewers of scientific journals rejected this interpretation and wrote that the evidence is insufficient. There was indeed no water or predators in the chamber. How 15 people got in there? There is no explanation to this day. 2 camps of scientists argue over one red spot on a wall. The El Castillo cave in northern Spain was excavated back in the year 1903, and there are hundreds of drawings there. Discs, dots, handprints, deer, and bisons. The hands are done in reverse. The hand was pressed to the wall and blown with paint from the mouth or through a tube, and a light silhouette remained in a red cloud. The hands on the walls are small, and some researchers believe that these are the hands of women and teenagers. In the year 2012, the group of Alistair Pike measured not the paint itself, but the calcite crust over it. It turned out that one red disc was applied no later than 40,800 years ago, and right here, problems began. Sapiens arrived in this corner of Europe approximately at the same time. This means that a Neanderthal could have also drawn it. Later, another group announced that in 3 Spanish caves, the paint is older than 60,000 years, and back then there were no sapiens in Europe at all. These dates are still disputed to this day, and there is no calm agreement. The passages of El Castillo stretch for more than 700 meters, and some of the drawings are located far from the entrance, where one cannot reach without fire. The cave is included in the World Heritage List. Small groups are allowed inside. In the year 1976, Neil Armstrong descended into a cave in the Ecuadorian jungle, the very one. He was the honorary leader of a joint British-Ecuadorian expedition, and he did not limit himself to a photo session at the entrance. He climbed inside and spent the night underground. The reason was the Hungarian Juan Moritz. He stated under oath that he had found a metal library in the Taos caves, thousands of embossed plates with the text of an unknown civilization. The story was picked up by Eric von Daniken. The book spread around the world, and expeditions flocked to the cave. The descent into the main entrance is almost 70 vertical meters. Below are halls washed out by ancient rivers, and a darkness in which a crackling sound stands. This is how the oil birds orient themselves. Nocturnal birds for the sake of whose chicks the Shuar Indians descended here with torches for centuries. The expedition of the year 1976 found neither the library nor traces of structures. Moritz, by that moment, refused to lead the researchers to that very hall and led them to another place. What he saw and whether he saw anything at all, he never explained. There is archaeology there after all, only more modest. Ceramics, charcoal, stone tools, and a burial. People used the cave for thousands of years. Now the passages are mapped with laser scanners, and there is still no metal on the walls. 14,000 years is too late for such a skull. By this time, the Neanderthals had died out long ago. Europe was inhabited by humans of the modern type, but in the Maludong cave in southwestern China lay bones with a thick vault, heavy brow ridges, a flat nose, and almost without a chin. Excavations went on from the year 1979 to the year 1989. Then the material lay in a cabinet. They sorted it out only in the year 2012, when the group of Darren Curnow from the University of New South Wales took up the find. The cave was named after the bones of which there were the most there. Deer, and once again, deer, some with traces of butchering and burning. The people from Maludong hunted red deer and roasted them. All kinds of versions were put forward. A late branch of archaic humans, a separate species, a hybrid with Denisovans. The dispute hit a wall in the fact that it was impossible to extract DNA from the bones. The climate there is warm and humid. For genetics, this is a death sentence. They succeeded in the year 2022. They extracted the genome from the skull cap, and it turned out to be the genome of a human of the modern type, related to the ancestors of East Asians and Native Americans. That is, the bones are archaic, but the genes are ours. Why such an appearance was preserved in this population, there is no explanation yet. He was a cripple and lived so many years like that. The Neanderthal from the Iraqi cave Shanidar, who was found under number 1, the excavators among themselves called Nandi. His right arm was missing above the elbow, his left eye was knocked out by a blow, the bones of the skull around the ear canals had overgrown with growths, he almost could not hear, all the injuries healed long before death. Such a person could neither hunt nor defend himself nor hear a creeping predator. This means he was fed and kept close for years. The excavations were led by Ralph Selecki from Columbia University from the year 1951 to the year 1960. In total, he found the remains of 10 Neanderthals. The second story from Shanidar is about flowers. Around the skeleton under number 4, accumulations of pollen were discovered, and Selecki decided that the deceased was covered with flowers. The version spread all over the world. Later, it was taken apart piece by piece. Digging bees and rodents could have brought the pollen into the soil, and there is nothing to prove the burial bouquet. But in the year 2016, archaeologists from Cambridge returned to the cave, and almost immediately new bones appeared. The skull of a woman, crushed into a flat cake by the weight of the rock, was assembled from 200 fragments and the face was restored. The body lay in a depression, a vertical stone stood behind the head. It looks like a place marker, but no one dares to assert this. The height of the adult woman is 106 centimeters. The brain volume is approximately like that of a chimpanzee. The skeleton was taken out in the year 2003 from the bottom of an excavation in the Liang Bua cave on the Indonesian island of Flores, from a depth of about 6 meters. An Australian-Indonesian group was looking for traces of the settlement of modern humans, but found a human who was not in any classification. The species was named Homo floresiensis, and the nickname stuck immediately, Hobbit. Nearby lay stone tools, traces of fire, and the bones of a stegodon, a dwarf elephant the size of a cow. That is, these meter-tall people hunted elephants and knew how to cook. The bones turned out not to be fossilized. They were soaked in water and in consistency were closer to soggy cardboard. They were dried and strengthened for weeks. Then a scandal happened. The famous Indonesian anthropologist Teuku Jacob, who considered the find a sick person, took the skeleton to his laboratory. The bones returned with damage, a broken jaw, chipped fragments of the pelvis. Part of the data was lost irretrievably. At first they thought that hobbits survived until 12,000 years ago. A recount of the layers in the year 2016 pushed the date back. The skeleton lay there from 100,000 to 60,000 years. The coincidence with the arrival of sapiens on the island turns out to be almost neck and neck. The bones were taken for victims of Franco. In the year 1994, speleologists found human remains in the El Sidron cave in northern Spain and reported to the police. Republicans hid in these mountains, and such finds are a common occurrence there. The examination gave an unexpected answer. The bones were 49,000 years old. In one chamber lay 13 Neanderthals, 7 adults, 3 teenagers, 2 children, and an infant. All died simultaneously. On the bones are cuts by stone tools and longitudinal splits through which bone marrow is extracted. The conclusion is unpleasant but cautious. More likely starvation in a difficult season than a custom. Further excavations went on in sterile suits and masks so as not to introduce their own DNA. This gave a result that was nowhere else. Geneticists unraveled the kinship within the group. The men turned out to be relatives to each other on the maternal line, and the women came from other families. This is how the majority of human societies are structured even now. From the same bones, they extracted a variant of the gene that is responsible for red hair, and a gene associated with speech. Talk by all accounts they could. And one more detail, from dental calculus. In a Neanderthal with a purulent abscess of the jaw, traces of poplar bark, which contains a natural analog of aspirin, and mold of the genus Penicillium were found in the plaque. Coincidence or treatment? The question is open. Raymond Dart believed that our ancestors were born killers. Pierced skulls, split bones, accumulations of remains in caves. He explained all this simply. The ape-man hunted, fought, and finished off his fellow tribesmen. The hypothesis survived into books and films. Charles Brain, who excavated the Swartkrans cave a few kilometers from Sterkfontein for 30 years, dismantled it. He took a child's Paranthropus skull with 2 neat holes in the occipital part and applied the lower fangs of a leopard to them. It matched down to the millimeter. The picture flipped. The people in this cave were not the masters, but the prey. Leopards dragged the carcasses onto the trees over the sinkhole. The leftovers fell down and accumulated in the layers together with the bones of antelopes. Thus was born a whole science about how bones get into the earth and what can be read from this. But the most interesting thing in Swartkrans lay higher. In layers with an age of about 1 million years, they found more than 200 burnt bones. Microscopy showed heating to 300 to 500 degrees, and such uniform heating is produced by a campfire and not a step fire. This is one of the oldest pieces of evidence that humans kept fire. In the same place they found bones with polished ends. They were used to open termite mounds. You can knock on one of the columns and it responds with a hum. The hall is called exactly that, the music room. The Loltun cave on the Yucatan Peninsula stretches for more than 2 kilometers, and the name in the Mayan language means stone flower. The first excavations there were led in the early 20th century by Edward Thompson, the very one who later retrieved sacrificial gifts from the bottom of the well in Chichen Itza. In the lower layers, he found stone tools next to the bones of a mammoth and a giant sloth. People sat in this cave when Ice Age beasts still walked the Yucatan. No less than 10,000 years ago. Higher go the Mayan layers, ceramics, carving, drawings on the walls, traces of long and peaceful use. At the entrance, a relief with the figure of a ruler and a headdress is carved, and the style in it is so early that the figure is associated with the era before the classical cities. And then Loltun once again became a refuge. During the caste war in the 19th century, Indians hid in the cave from punishers, partitioned the passages with walls, and lived inside for months. These masonry walls stand there to this day, between stalactites and the traces of mammoths. A cave worker climbed where tourists are not guided. December of the year 1999, Ireland, the Dunmore cave under County Kilkenny. In a crevice between the stones lay 43 items made of silver and bronze, ingots, twisted strips, fragments of jewelry. The hoard was dated to approximately the year 970. Who hid it, they did not establish. Most likely, a wealthy person left the property in a hurry and did not return. And there was a reason to hurry in this cave. In Irish chronicles under the year 928, it is recorded that Vikings from Dublin attacked the locals, and people took shelter in Dunmore. The attackers lit fires at the entrances and the smoke went inside. According to the chronicle, 1,000 people died. The figure is most likely inflated as usual in medieval chronicles. But in the 70s of the 20th century, the bones of at least 44 people were raised from the bottom of the cave, and almost all are women and children. There are almost no men among them. Today, excursions go there along a concrete path with lighting, and in the largest hall stands a flowstone 6 meters high. The state of Kentucky does not have an outlet to the sea. Mammoth Cave, which lies under it, is the longest in the world. More than 650 kilometers of passages have already been mapped, and every year a new 10 is added. In the limestone of these walls sit sharks. 325 million years ago, there was a shallow, warm sea here. The silt turned into stone, and along with it, everything that fell into it fossilized. Teeth and cartilage stick right out of the ceiling and walls of the galleries through which excursions are guided. The first tooth of a new species was noticed not by a paleontologist, but by the park superintendent Barclay Trimble. He went down together with a research group. In the year 2024, they described at once 2 sharks unknown to science, and one was named in his honor. The length of both is about 3.5 meters, approximately like a small city car. They cannot be pulled out. The skeleton of a shark is cartilaginous. It crumbles, and any attempt to pick the find out of the wall will destroy it. Therefore, they photograph, scan, and leave it in place. Some see a staircase, others still cracks in the basalt. In the year 2019, enthusiasts of satellite images spotted on Greenwich Island off the coast of Antarctica a dark opening in the cliff, and in front of it even horizontal steps. Further, all over the internet went everything at once: a secret base, an entrance to an underground city, traces of a civilization that lived here before the glaciation. The resolution of the image at the same time is such that a single person on it would be a dot of 1 pixel. Geologists explain it more boringly. The volcanic rocks of this archipelago are layered, and they break down in layers. Water flows into the cracks, freezes, and tears off pieces and even ledges. Such steps exist on the coasts of Iceland and the Faroes, and one can travel there on a ferry. A grain of rice is twice as long as this creature. In May of the year 2024, in an underground reservoir of a cave in the north of Australia, an unknown crustacean was found. 4 millimeters, a transparent body, large claws, and teeth near the mouth. In one small lake, they counted about 80 of them. Such animals never come out into the light. Underground fauna has neither eyes nor pigment. Spending resources on them is pointless, but on the other hand, the antennae and hairs with which they catch the movement of water lengthen. They live long and slowly, because there is almost no food underground. Australia for such fauna is the main place on the planet. In the limestones and old iron ore strata in the west of the country, hundreds of species of underground crustaceans and worms have been found, and most of them have not even been described yet. Many sit in a single reservoir and are not found anywhere else. What exactly the new species eats, they have not yet found out. First of all, they tried to declare the Hobbit sick. Since it has a 1-meter height and a small brain, it means microcephaly. It did not match. Then cretinism from a lack of iodine. It did not match. Then Down syndrome. Again, it did not match. The dispute went on for more than 10 years, and every time it was closed by bones and not opinions. The wrist of the Flores man is structured in an ancient way. Such small bones exist in apes and early hominids, but they do not occur in a sick sapiens. The shoulder joint is deployed differently. The foot is long and without an arch. A disease does not work like that. They lived on the island for tens of thousands of years and hunted what lived there. Dwarf elephants, giant rats, lizards. Their neighbors were Komodo dragons and storks the height of a human. The island in general likes to change sizes. The large on it becomes smaller, the small it grows. The hobbits disappeared approximately when modern humans arrived on Flores. There are no direct traces of collision, but the coincidence in time is too tight. And one more thing, the residents of Flores have old stories about Ibu Gogo, small hairy creatures who lived in caves, stole food, and repeated other people's words. Folklorists recorded these stories long before the excavations. This is not proof, but they tell them precisely on that island. In the year 1887, 2 men tied a raft made of flax stems and entered on it into a stream that went under a cliff. These were the local Maori chief Tane Tinarau and the English surveyor Fred Mace. They lit candles and floated downstream into the darkness. After a few tens of meters, they blew out the fire and saw the sky above them. The ceiling glowed with greenish-blue dots, and there were thousands of them. These are the larvae of the fungus gnat. They hang on the ceiling in mucus nests and let down sticky threads up to 40 centimeters in length, and they need the the light as a lure, a midge flies to the light and falls into a trap. A hungry larva shines brighter than a full one. Tame Tinarau also found a dry entrance from the surface, and in the year 1889, together with his wife Huti, began to guide visitors there for a fee. In the year 1906, the state took the cave for itself. The family sought a return for more than 80 years and received their own only in the year 1989. Today, among the guides there work his direct descendants. The limestone around is 30 million years older than all of this. Shells and corals are visible in the walls. The place where they now sell tickets was once the bottom of the sea. Over the entrance to the cave hung the sign of a tavern, Wilson's Liquor Vault and House for Entertainment. That is how this establishment lured the crews of cargo flatboats that floated down the Ohio River at the end of the 18th century. The owner was Samuel Mason, and the tavern worked as a bait. The cave suited this perfectly. An entrance with a width of about 17 meters right on the shore, and in the vault, a through crevice, a natural chimney. Inside, one can burn a campfire, sleep in dryness, and see the whole river. The guests were given drinks, beaten in games, and then floated down without goods and often without life. The Hart brothers, the bloodiest characters of the frontier of that time, joined this den. Historians already in the 30s of the 19th century wrote about this place as an old colony of horse thieves and counterfeiters. In the year 1799, the patience of the neighbors ran out. A detachment of volunteers who called themselves the Exterminators surrounded the shore and cleaned out the cave. Then the career of the place went on a curve. By the middle of the 19th century, a church was set up in the cave. Then they removed it too. Since the year 1929, here is an Illinois state park, an empty hall in the cliff, and a view of the river. Archaeologists expected to find 2 or 3 flint flakes. They found more than 100. The matter was in February of the year 2024 in the Polish cave Raj, which is near the city of Kielce. The cave was discovered in the year 1963 by 2 local school children. Then it was examined. Traces of Neanderthals and animal bones were noted, and with that everything quieted down for almost 60 years. An expedition of the University of Warsaw returned there for a clarification of datings and bumped into a bone-bearing layer. Out of the ground came mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, cave lions and bears, horses, about 200 large bones in good preservation, and separately a multitude of deer antlers. The head of the work noted that the antlers surprised the most. They are whole but small. The flint at the same time lay in the same layers as the bones. That is, most likely, Neanderthals lived here not on flying visits but for a long time. The butchering marks on the bones are still being studied. Radiocarbon dates are awaited. For tourists, the cave opened in the year 1972. To walk through it is 180 meters, and the entrance is made through an artificial tunnel with a length of 21 meters. It works as an airlock and keeps a constant microclimate inside. The first buyers refused to take them. The shepherds brought the scrolls to Bethlehem. The merchants twirled them in their hands and did not see the value. In the end, 4 scrolls went for 7 Jordanian pounds. By current money, this is a few $100s for everything. Then the manuscripts went to the Syrian metropolitan Mar Athanasius Samuel, who took them out to the United States and could not sell them for 7 years. In the year 1954, he placed an advertisement in a business newspaper. 4 Dead Sea Scrolls for sale, a suitable gift for an educational or religious institution. The advertisement was seen by the Israeli archaeologist Yigael Yadin. He acted through proxies and bought everything for $250,000. Yadin's father, who was the first in Jerusalem to identify ancient biblical texts in these scraps, was by that time no longer alive. The longest scroll almost perished altogether. The temple scroll, with a length of about 8 meters, a merchant nicknamed Kondo kept at his home under a floor tile, wrapped in cellophane and a shoebox. Moisture managed to eat part of the text. The scroll was confiscated only in the year 1967. In it is described in detail what the new, correct temple should be like instead of the Jerusalem one, which the authors considered defiled. Why the manuscripts ended up in the caves at all is clear from history. In the year 66, an uprising against Rome began. Legions marched through Judea, and the library was hidden in the cliffs in the calculation to return. No one returned. And a small afterword. In the year 2020, a museum in Washington checked its 16 fragments, bought for a lot of money, and all 16 turned out to be fakes. Police officers from the Parisian Sports Brigade were practicing the descent into the dungeons. A usual training, September of the year 2004. They entered through a drainage well into a closed part of the quarries and bumped into a tarpaulin with the inscription, "Construction, no passage." Behind the tarpaulin, a corridor began. Right around the corner stood a table, and above it, a video surveillance camera, which turned on upon movement. Another few meters later, a sensor triggered, and dogs barked in the darkness. A recording, judging by everything so that a random person would turn around and leave. The police officers went further and came out into a hall with an area of about 400 square meters at a depth of 18 meters. Step terraces were chopped out in the stone. On them stood armchairs. Opposite hung a full-size screen. Nearby stood a projector and lay cassettes, black and white classics of the 50s and modern thrillers. In the neighboring hall worked a bar, bottles of whiskey, tables, chairs, and a pressure cooker for couscous. Electricity was brought in competently, in an engineering way, and 3 telephone lines went down. The walls were painted with signs, Celtic crosses, Stars of David, something else. 3 days later, the investigators returned with electricians. The cables were cut, the equipment taken away, the hall empty. In the middle of the floor lay a note. In it was written, "Do not try to look for us." Under Paris, there are about 280 kilometers of such passages. Officially, 1.5 are open. They did not have to look for them. They showed up themselves. Responsibility for the cinema hall was taken by a group that calls itself the Underground Perforators, a part of an informal network under the name Urban Experiment. They turned out to have no mystical goals. People had walked under the city for many years, equipped halls, showed movies to each other, and left until morning. And a year after the story with the cinema hall, the same company did something more serious. Several people penetrated the Parisian Pantheon, assembled a workshop with armchairs and an electric stove under the roof, and for a whole year at night restored a 19th century clock that the administration had left to rust back in the 60s. The clock started going. Then the restorers themselves came to the management and told everything. The management filed a lawsuit. The court dismissed the case, and after this, it was ordered to stop the mechanism. A part was removed from the clock, and the hands stopped again. The people who hid the cinema hall behind the tarpaulin and the barking of dogs repaired the city clock and confessed to this voluntarily. For this, they were judged. Write in the comments everything that you think regarding the finds in the caves, and subscribe to the Top Facts channel on the selection of the most incredible facts and videos from all over the internet. Thank you all very much for viewing, and right now watch our previous incredible episodes which have already appeared on your screen.